Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 693. The road to 700 continues. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the master of speculation, the duke of the sultan of strategery, the bridge defying. He firmly feels that saving people from risking their lives crossing the death traps that are large bridges is the only way to effectively celebrate Superhero Day, and he remains the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Action Comics 1054 and Superman number 3 as we continue a look at the Superman books. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
Well, actually, Titans issue number 1 has been relisted, and you can get the Nicholas Scott cover for 50% off, only at $199. Plus, also, Titans number 2 is at 40% off, $239, so that's a nice deal. And Steelworks, issue number 1 of 6 is 40% off, only $299. So, thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, there's some really cool books out there right now. They have the Authority Trade Paperback Book 1, 2023 edition, $29.99 regularly, 50% off, only $14.99. The Creature Commandos Trade Paperback, 2023 edition, $24.99 regularly, 50% off, only $12.49. Great way to dive into these characters if you haven't had a chance to take a look at them. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on this show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
Nice work, Atom. What are these characters up to?
Our first discussion this episode is going to be of Action Comics 1054. The writer is Philip Kennedy Johnson. The artist is Max Raynor. Colorist is Matt Herms. The letterer is Dave Sharp. Cover by Steve Beach. Variant covers by Rafa Sandoval and Matt Herms and David Talaski. Yasmin Flores Montanez. And the Superman variant cover by Ibrahim Mustafa. The assistant editor is Gillian Grant. And the editor is Paul Kaminsky. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family, and apologies for any name butchery there. This has been an interesting book with Dawn of DC, and we'll talk about, because it's got co-features in there, which is really nice this time around. I've been really enjoying Action Comics. How have you been enjoying the format of Action Comics? You know, before we dive into the stories, where we're getting the main feature, but then we're getting these co-features. You know, it's been Lois and Clark and Power Girl, but this one's got Steel in it. How have you been enjoying that kind of exploration of the greater, like, is this the right format for Action Comics? Is this what you want out of this book?
Actually, I love this. And you know, it's funny because you mentioned how we were getting Power Girl and now we're getting Steel. And you know how big a fan I am of Steel, but also the fact that I read somewhere that Power Girl is going to be getting her own series. So spinning out of this, Power Girl is going on. And I think it's going to be that same format of the limited run, but you never know what can happen on a limited run. It may, become ongoing like it did with some of the other ones in the past. So yeah. I like that they're doing this, giving a taste of what the story could be, and then maybe it'll go into something else. Because, again, I love a Steelworks book, especially, when we get to we talk about Steel in this one. This is a really cool story, and I want to see where that goes. And, the side features are nice. It's a young John Kent. So I was like, that's kind of cool that we're getting a story back in time where John's a kid and he's still, before he gets snatched up by Ultraman. So this was definitely a win-win for me because it still has a solid Superman story going on.
And you're getting quality creators, right? I mean, I think that's really a key when you've got stories like this. And sometimes when they do these, I should say sometimes, I'm really going back a ways. I can't remember a time now where they've been fluff pieces. I'm going back into my childhood where sometimes these felt like add-ons or tack-ons. I don't see that out of these. They're rich stories. They're forwarding the characters. I will say, like, characters like Green Arrow and stuff like that, growing up, that was how I got to know those characters, were the fact that they were backup characters in some of the other books that I was reading. And it was a great way for me to get to know them, get interested in them, want to follow them. So I like this format. And to your point, more Power Girl spinning out of this is a great thing. If it stays in a miniseries format, cool. At least I'm getting more Power Girl stories. If it leads into an ongoing series, that's cool too. But I think, I've mentioned it before on the show, one of my concerns when they were relaunching some of these titles or reworking some of them is, are we going to keep getting that experimental nature, exploring some of their lesser-known characters, moving forward their stories? And it's been the opposite of that. We're getting a ton of that. Yes. And I think in a very targeted way where they're trying to figure out, like, what will the industry support? What will the comic book audience support? Trying to make these successful endeavors. So I'm hoping that these miniseries are doing well. I'm hoping that they've found the right balance where the comic fan can support it financially. And ultimately, then it's good for us. It's good for, the creators. It's good for really everybody. It's good for the industry just to have more. We were watching last night Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 for the purpose of, getting ready for Volume 3 next week. One of the things that just really struck my wife was really enjoying the film because she hadn't seen the second one. So that was her first viewing of it. It's really neat to see lesser known characters on the screen and to see them done really well. And I think when you see stuff like that, and it gives me hope for things like Blue Beetle. It gives me hope for, more Peacemaker. It gives me hope for Creature Commandos and stuff like that are coming down the pike, that we're starting to get some of these unique exploration of properties. Because I think that's where do you get a larger audience from? I think it's from the fact that it's not all Superman. It's not all Batman. It's not all Wonder Woman. It's a lot of the other characters as well. I want those main characters. I've got to have those main characters. And that's going to be the tricky part for these studios. And it's, I think it's Marvel's facing that tricky part right now. DC's going to face that tricky part, is what is the right balance, right? Of getting well-known characters in people's faces so that way they get excited for them, and these exploration titles that people will take the chance and go out and see. Because I don't think the fatigue thing is really what the issue is. I think, it's knowing which one to go see, with the amount of movies out there right now. Because movies in general, when you take a look at them, are just struggling. So it's not a superhero thing. Take a look at the amount of movies that are going out that you don't hear a lot of buzz around. So there's movies that have been failures that wouldn't have been failures before the pandemic because of the way we explore multiplexes. So it's going to be an interesting sort of thing. I like that the comics are, because you got to take a look at, I'm sure the comic company's looking at, how are we creating content that will also potentially set up maybe a movie down the road, or an animated feature, or a TV series, or a mini series, or something like that. We got Werewolves by Night, and it was great, by the way, on Disney Plus. I'm loving the fact that there's things right now that I'm seeing, like Steel. Could we eventually get Steel on screen on some level? I hope so.
It's a good version, not the Shaq version.
Yes, exactly. And it's something where a Steelworks show or something. I mean, there's this kind of stuff. You don't know how it's going to pay off, and there's got to be a part of the company that and the creators that are looking towards what could this become besides what we're just doing and I don't want to say just doing in the comics, but besides what we're doing in the medium. I wonder if there's pressure. I guess that's more my question. Is there pressure to try and make these things into, stay true to the character, but also make them something where maybe we could use them elsewhere later? I don't know.
So, and actually, something just did pop in my head. We do have a good version of Steel out there in TV show, in the Superman
yes,
and Lois.
Yes.
So
yep.
And that is, for me, is a phenomenal version of Steel. That's obviously he's not he's alternate Earth Steel coming through, but
Cool,
the strength of the character 100% coming through, and that is big time coming through. I think they did her really well in the TV show as well. So we are getting a steal. So
and to your point, a great version of it. It's using. I think it was a great character to use for the alternate universe, because you could have created an original character, right? That wasn't connected to that. I always prefer when you take somebody like Steel and change it a little bit, because of the fact that you're dealing with a version of him that he was with Lois Lane in that world.
Yeah.
And it made it a whole interesting twist. You're right. That's a great example, and I stand corrected. We've already gotten that on screen. But that's more of what I want. Exactly what you're saying is more of what I want to see more of that. It's a great way to introduce characters to a larger audience. And that part's cool.
And the other thing I'm really digging about Action Comics has been the growth and development of all the characters inside it.
Yep.
You think about it, Superman, if you're not careful, Superman can be a very stagnant character, because he's so powerful. And how do you make him the threat against him feel credible? Well, the old adage is you depower them. You depower Superman, or you make it so he's weaker or something. This book has really done a great job with creating these villains, but creating these scenarios. We've introduced the super twins. Great usage of the whole, everything that went, to bring them into the mix. We're increasing the Superman family story, not just John and Lois, but all of the people around Superman.
Yeah.
We're using them more. So this really, I think Action's doing a brilliant job with showing how powerful Superman is, showing how you can have a villain against Superman without going with the age-old, oh, here's kryptonite, now I can beat you up until he knocks away the kryptonite. No, we're getting some solid villains that pushes him. And you understand how and why he's pushing them, and how, but also you get these great Superman moments. Like, this book had, 1054 had just that Superman where I'm like, that's why I like the big guy. Right there. That's why I like Superman. That's why I'm a Superman guy.
And he's more powerful. I mean, we've actually gone a different level to the point, and I'm nodding as you're talking, but one of the pieces I want to make sure we note, they not only did they not depower him, they actually increased his powers. So he's actually more powerful now. And it's working as a storytelling tool. It's great.
Oh, big time. It's kind of like when he had that supernova power, which I think he still has, that John kind of has now, where he would use it and then he'd lose his powers for 24 hours. And I liked that. I thought that was kind of neat, the way they explained it. It was just that massive full burst of energy. Everything he has in the tank, he throws out. And I like that. I thought that was kind of neat. This one, he has that power level, but he doesn't get depowered afterwards. And I'm like, ooh, that's really nice.
The twins, Atho and Asul, I think I've got them right as far as the pronunciations of them, I think are an interesting addition. And I actually like their relationship with John, where, John, they have the ability to have with John's parents the years that he didn't get to have with them. And it's kind of a two-sided piece for him, where it's not just the fact that he lost those years, but that his parents did, and he knows it bothers his parents, right? That they didn't get to be there for that. So there's an interesting confusion for him as far as how to react to them and what that looks like. And I like that drama, which is normal, very real, is something that plays out in the events of this issue, where you see a John that's like, oh man, the way I talked to the kids and what they thought, I could have corrected this. They could have known that, I am glad that they're here. It's just, I'm trying to figure this out. And I really liked how natural and human that felt. When you've got this many characters and you're looking at the whole Superman family, and I'm not just talking about his supporting cast, we're talking about, we've got Power Girl, we've got Supergirl, we've got, all of these characters that are put in. We've got our Superman from overseas is in this as well. They've done a great job, and Connor's in this. They've done a great job of, in various configurations, having these characters get a certain amount of screen time and increased character development, where there's a reason for them all to be there, which That's hard too, and we're talking about the fact that so Clark is super like enhanced and super powered, so he is like Superman Prime in this, and yet you've got the other family members, and you've created a world where there's a reason why you need all of them. You know, they're able to divvy up into various configurations, or you've got this Metallo that is now like every time you go around a corner, there's another Metallo. The Metallo family is much larger in number. And because of the kryptonite piece involving the Metallos, it's something where you've got your Superman family has to deal with them from a distance. It's really a challenge as far as who is a Metallo. Because you can be standing next to somebody that you think is perfectly normal, and it actually turns out that person's one of them.
Yeah,
and that there's a creep factor that I love.
And just this episode opening up with Otho, attacking the person, and they're like, "Oh no, she attacked a person." Like, "Oh no, that was a Metallo." She knew it was a Metallo, and further, she probably knew about the other ones who then revealed themselves, and that's why she was doing what she was doing. She recognized, or she could see the War World engine, inside them, and she reacted. Now, as I've said before, many times, call for backup, but she's young, so I'm going to give her a pass. I'm not initially calling for backup and trying to handling it herself because she is a hero, so she wants to step up, so good for her. But I loved how this thing played out, where, again, John's like, "Oh, God, I got to get him to the hospital." No need, Superman. Bam! And then all the other ones show up, and you're just like, "Oh, that is a brilliant one. I love that." And this, again, you gotta love a really good villain. You gotta love that, and 100% shows that they're up against somebody dangerous. And we later learned that it's not Metallo. Metallo is not the big bad. And that is a swerve I didn't see coming. I knew somebody else was Puppet Master playing the strings, but I did not see where this went, and I was very happy about that. I love when the swerves surprised me.
Well, let's just jump to, if we could, who the big bad, because there's so much to talk about in this that we might as well just jump to who the big bad is. It's Cyborg Superman, which I didn't see coming. We knew all along there was a big bad that somehow was mimicking who his sister is, which was ultimately driving him, because Corbin's story is a really complex and interesting one. When you look at his childhood, you look at his upbringing, you look at, various circumstances that have made him who he is, you kind of, you don't, I'm not saying that you condone what he does, but you understand him, which is always great with a villain, where you can understand why the villain operates the way that he does. When you add in like this family element and really explore his sister, and this is somebody who's like, okay, listen, Superman, if you would just be the hero and would just take care of my sister and all of those pieces, this would be a very different conversation right now. He's justified and continually justified in his mind his course of action as he's doing the right thing because he's doing it for his sister, and the world's always been against him, and this is his chance to do it for his sister. And you're like sitting there like, okay, I don't agree with him,
but I understand.
Right.
I understand this motivation. I think that's the cool thing about a villain, when we understand why they're doing it. That makes them it makes for a better story, but also if you can on some level sympathize with them, it makes it even harder to you don't revel in the punch when the hero knocks them out and beats them up, because they're a victim. And again, we see how Soup handles him. Again, that's one of the things I love about Superman, that he doesn't humiliate him. He doesn't do the beat down. He stops him from hurting people, and then he's like, okay, now let's help you. I haven't given up on you yet. And I love when you see that side of Superman where I haven't given up on the bad guy yet. I'm still going to help him. And adding the whole Cyborg Superman, I'll tell you, he's another wonderful character that they've done various iterations on him. Yeah. And they've given him a lot of levels. So I'm very curious to see where this is going to go with him. Because, again, this is a creative team. I'm really loving what they're doing. So I want to see their take on Cyborg Superman. But 100% complete shock and surprise. I was thinking it was going to be somebody from War World. was the main puppet master.
Sure.
That was my thought, that we were going to go back to that whole villain set. Whether, I don't know who from Warworld it was going to be, but I was 100% thinking it was going to be somebody that we had seen when Soup was on Warworld. And it was just going to be those, okay, now we're going full circle kind of deals. But completely throw me left field with the Cyborg. I was like, oh, that is brilliant.
One of the things I really like about this creative team is they took Metallo and made Metallo, which, is already a creepy concept, into something even creepier by adding in this idea of the Metallo family, increasing, how this is being used, how experimentation has advanced. Again, we've got progression. It's Cyborg Superman is a character who has always had like a certain creep factor right from the introduction, right? Because I remember in, Return of Superman where, you were seeing this new, is that a part of Clark? I mean, because there was trying to figure that out monthly as it was going on, because you were getting weekly issues that were focusing on different characters, and then eventually the characters, the four of them, started intersecting, and you're wondering which one is really Superman, or is John Henry Irons? I kept thinking John Henry Irons got Superman's heart. Yeah. As far as that, like all of them on some level were somehow connected to Superman. I loved that wasn't how it played out, but I liked that I was trying to solve the unfolding mystery as this thing was rolling out. Cyborg Superman has always been it was the swerve, because he had even though he was cyborg, he had like the closest look to Superman. So you're like, well, there has to be some part of him really there, right? Yeah. And the creep factor of that character and what you can do with him throughout the years. I'm wondering if this is the original Cyborg Superman and has evolved. I don't care, because you're right. I think your explanation of it's true. There have been multiple iterations. Which one is this? The reason why I'm thinking it might very well be the original is this writer has done a really good job of bringing back, the original Metallo and expanding that. I'm wondering if we aren't bringing back the original Cyborg Superman and building off of that somehow. I don't care. It's more me interested in the story to a level where I'm trying to think through where this could be going. And I always love that. That's something where when I'm done reading a book and I'm thinking beyond the pages, that's when the creative team has just done a stellar job. Boy, has Superman been, the Superman books, I should say, have been a fun read. Action Comics, in particular, with this particular storyline, has been just really, really grabbing me. Because we've got this, wrote this ongoing thread of Lex Luthor and him working sort of with Superman and what his motivations are and how much can you trust Lex. And, Lex had a role in this whole Metallo thing.
Yes.
And, that's a part that can't be ignored. And I really like that, we haven't made Lex this, shiny good guy in this scenario, but I also like that there's an interconnectivity between the two books, but they have independent storylines, where what's going on with Lex and Superman is reflected here, but they're telling their own arc that, is clearly either paralleling or taking place a little bit before, a little bit after the book, what's going on with Superman. Doesn't matter which. I like that we're getting two different stories that feel like they're taking place in the same world. It's hard for writers to do that. And they've done a really good job of making this feel like that same universe.
Yes. Oh, God, yeah. And it's mentioned before, we're going to continue mentioning how just the family element in both books are coming through. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that this John, that John, this Lex, that Lex, they all seem the same.
Yep.
And I think that is something neat. And again, the John and the twins, I love that part of the story where John is 100% blaming himself for, the twins getting captured and everything that's happened. And, and it feels so true to who John is. And just him and, Clark's just interaction, that one simple page of John saying, hey, it's my fault. I've got to find him. I've got to be it. And Clark's like, no. You deal with you and the others. You have to clean up this mess. I'll find them. And I like that, again, that delegation of authority. And it hurts John to back down, but he knows it's the right call because they do have to deal with all the other Metallos. He needs to get the troops in and get all of the super family dealing with that while Clark looks out for him. But whenever they do the super hearing right, and they really tell a cool story where Clark just shows how powerful super hearing is. I always laugh because I remember as a kid thinking, oh, that's the lamest power. And when you get stuff like this where it really shows the coolness of it, especially where they have just a brief panel talking about how Clark is able to break out and focus and then actually reach out for the twins, reach out for their unique signature. And I love the fact that he blocks everything out, closes his eyes, listens past all other sounds until he has his one favorite sound underneath it, John's heartbeat. I love that line, the fact that it's John's heartbeat, because it probably used to be Lois's that he used to use, for that, but now it's his son. Now he does that, and that's when he's able to reach out and actually use the powers, because the super hearing is always something that would drive me insane, hearing all these cries for help and not being able to help them. I love when a creative team really does show how much control over hearing he has.
And it was funny, you mentioned it as a brief panel, but it was really layered what they did with it, which was really cool. Because he has that moment with John, which I couldn't agree with you more, was really cool. But I love that he checked the heartbeat before he left. Like, really checking to see, is my son okay? Is he on board? And it serves multiple purposes. It serves the purpose you're talking about, because then there's also the layer of he's using that as a lynch point to start centering himself. And he builds out from that to Lois, to Jimmy, to Perry, again, the familiar people. He's like stretching out gradually further and further. And they actually show it in the panel, like how he's almost using it like a radar. And so that next double page, like, really expanded out this idea of he centered himself with his son, extended to, again, other familiar heartbeats that he would normally latch onto, and he's going outward, focusing, centering himself, because he's got this experience with this. And it really gave a cool sense of what that was like. But I love that it wasn't just to center himself, it was also to check on his kid before he left.
Yeah.
Is John okay? Is he on board? I know, and he knew from listening to the heartbeat, but also knowing his kid and his reaction, that John's going to go do what he needs to do, what he needs to get done. But I love that the heartbeat was a part of that. It was multiple, dual layered on what he was doing there. And it was a great way to show how that power is how he interacts with others. And it was such a neat thing. I just thought it was really well done. Great use of artwork. I love the way that broke up, kind of, instead of having panels on that spread, they used kind of the radar as a way to kind of break up the page. And I thought it was just a neat way to do it from a narrative standpoint. Really, this is a strong artwork book as well. I really love the Superman artwork storytelling that they did with this, because it feels like the powers sometimes influence the art and style of the book in this Action Comics. It's really an interesting run. I'm really like this Dawn of DC run of this when it kicked off. I was loving the book before. It's kicked off like the next phase. And it feels different. It feels fresh. They're keeping me going. And I really appreciated that. Because then you head into this really horrific segment where Metallo's got the two kids, and he's got, again, what he thinks is his sister talking to him back there, but the bones and the cybernetic material and things like that below him, it's such a creepy sequence of events with the kids with like the dark green under their eyes. I mean, it's really an interesting, scary kind of, it's the right balance of, I guess, accessible scary, if that makes sense, because you aren't going over the top, making it so horrific but yet you've got to have a fear factor of it. And I really enjoyed the presentation. It found a really cool balance where I'm like, boy, this is creepy. Really gives me a sense of danger of Metallo when you've got a powered Superman like you were talking about earlier. I think you need this where you're like, well, this is why Superman is in danger and he's got to be careful how he handles the two kids. And there's a psychological piece of what's going on. And it's not just this guy. There is something bigger going on here. And Clark's got to uncover the mystery. You can't just go in punching. If you do that, you lose the opportunity to really figure out what's going on. There's a strategic value to that in how Superman's reacting to this that I really, really enjoyed. Because Clark's a very smart character. He's an investigative reporter. And, in the bumbling cover-ups that he does sometimes for his reasons for going missing, it should not be forgotten that the fact that he really is an investigative journalist and uses that skill as a way to uncover what's going on, to make himself more effective. I like that about him, and I feel like this book's encapsulating that person as well. That we're getting a really good Clark Kent here.
Yes, big time. And everything, it was funny what you're saying about the art team. I 100% agree with you. This story is a wonderful story, but it goes beyond that because of the art team. The art and the writing working together. And art, coloring, lettering, writing, the full creative team working together on, firing on all cylinders on this to really, tell the story. And the creepy factor of Metallo's base when they come in, it was funny because I liked how you said creepy because it's creepy, not gory. If it had been gory, then it would have taken away from some of it. But it's the sufficient creepiness of the failed experiments at his feet. So you got these rotting bodies that didn't quite make it into Metallo's. It's the old, you got to break an egg to make an omelet, and that you see all the broken shells underneath him. And I loved how they did that in there. And again, you even see, when Clark has reactions, to it, and he deals with this, and just some of the wonderful facial expressions on Metallo's face and on Clark's face as this is going on. And even, it's funny because Metallo has only half a face, really. But they're still able to capture the rage and the violence and just the horror. And then later on, they're able to capture the defeat that, I'm done. You got me, and, go ahead and gloat, and you see that even with like a half or a metal face. It's like, I love when creative teams can actually work together and do that kind of stuff. And even just the lettering when he really starts talking and they do the greenish tint to it, and it's not a nice clean lettering, so it's probably got a weird sound to it. On top of the weird look, it's also got a monstrous sound to his voice, and just everything they're playing out here. I absolutely loved this creative team working together. And
he wants to be human. Like there is this urge and need of his to be a human being. Even when, it's, his quote-unquote sister is reminding him that, now his face can be seen. It's like, you've got to find a way to cover up. You got to find another face because, your mask is gone. It's, for him, that it's really, really critical that, because that's part of what he struggles with, right? It's the loss of humanity. He wants to be human. This wasn't something...
Yeah.
It was something he sort of, depending on the storytelling, it was something he chose, but didn't know what he was choosing, so to speak. And, there's a horror to that I really, really enjoy. I mean, it's a tragic story, what happened to Corbin. And this book, I think, did a nice job in multiple issues of building the Metallo story to continue it on further to this point. Because he didn't start out where he's at now. He got here throughout the journey.
And some of the Cyborg Superman stories have had a similar groove to it where he's driven insane because of he lost his humanity, because his crew died, because of the people he loved and cared about died in front of him, and he barely survived and became this monstrosity. So it's, I kind of like, and again, it's never even, you don't put two and two together until you hit the spoiler. You're like, oh, okay, so that's part of going on with the family and part of the growth on that. So it does make me wonder which Cyborg Superman we're getting. And I love the fact that thinking off page, And that's something that this team has really done big time for me on thinking off page on the Super Twins, on John, on the full family, on this Blue Earth movement going on about because every so often, comic books will bring in a anti-alien storyline, and sometimes it's just a cookie cutter hate group kind of story. Sometimes they really go into it and they give a good depth, and they flesh out these villains. And this, again, this story really did flesh out who the Blue Earthers are, what they're about. And I liked that, we got to see some little depth in it. We're seeing a little bit more into it. They're not going away anytime soon, so I'm looking forward to further stories on that. But again, it's, you've got this brilliant balance of really cool Clark story, really cool John stories, really cool Superman moments, and you get epic Superman moments. Like, we talked about how Superman is more powerful now, and especially that mineral that comes from War World really escalates him. And I love that look of that really super powered Superman just knocking the crud out of Metallo. I was like, that for me is an epic Superman moment.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that too, because you get to see, a Superman who's, because of circumstance, is now able to withstand kryptonite in that moment, and which is something that Corbin is not used to. A Superman who's able to do that. Another piece that struck me on this. So recently, I went to Lake County Safety Council. And, there's monthly meetings that are done, and, it's really to help any form of business or organization just up their safety game for their employees and for visitors and things like that, just making sure your stuff is up to date. And there was a guy who was there that was just a dynamic, like fun, energetic speaker who lost both of his hands, and one of his arms lost up to the elbow area. And I'm poorly describing what was happening, but he had prosthetics. And, for most of his speech, he was doing it without the prosthetics on, just kind of showing that he lives kind of like this hybrid lifestyle of having them on certain points in time. They're battery charged, which I say that, it's, people are probably listening to go, of course, duh, because of the fact that you wouldn't want to be plugged in the whole time. But I thought it was really cool to see the battery life of these things, because he said he can usually go a whole day without a charge on them, which is, can't get my phone to do that. And he was, I'm not making light of it. He was really fun because he was joking around the whole time. And I'm endlessly impressed and respectful of people who have gone through these kind of tragedies that are life-changing, and really the way you interact with the world changing. They take this as this opportunity to, now he's become a speaker that really speaks on safety. And this was an example of something where he, instead of following the safety precaution, had done what we all do. And I'm guilty of this. I think everybody is, where in the rush to get something done quickly, you bypass a protocol because you just know, I got plenty of time to do this. I can just do that.
Yeah.
And it was that example where, unfortunately, a machine kicked in and took, both of his hands that way. Where I'm relating it to this story, and it just was timely. I was reading this Metallo story, and this guy's talking about the fact, he said, here's the thing, these prosthetics are super cool. And he said, I'm able to drive with them. He said, you get used to being able to use your, because he said, your muscles still work. So he said, up to the point where it connects to the prosthetic, you are able to open and close the hand using certain kind of muscles that, he said, it works differently than you would normally open and close your hand, but there's some similarities. So, it's generated from that. And he said, the part that you miss are the small things. And he said, it's huge. And he said, sometimes my wife breaks down at this. We'll hold hands, but I don't feel it.
Yeah.
And he said, there's things like that really strike you. And I connected to the stories. I'm reading, because while I was at this meeting, I just, recently read an issue of Action. And I actually reread it afterwards, because I'm like, wow, does this apply to the Metallo story? Where this guy has been, quote unquote, upgraded, but he doesn't have, the sense of touch and things like that we're so used to. And it was really striking me, how this guy was just being just really honest about like what that experience was like. He mentioned too in one of his situations, he was driving a truck, and he said that the batteries gave out, which locked the hand onto the steering wheel. And he said, fortunately, we had the charging cable with us, and my wife was with us, so she was able to help. Like we stopped the truck, and we were able to use the car charger, in order to get the hands working again. But he said that there's little things like that your batteries don't run out in your hands and things like that were really interesting, and it was so timely when he was talking about that. It was cool though to see the technology in use and seeing how when he put it on, he started doing like some really amazing things with the hands. That I'm like, wow, it's not a replacement, obviously, for your normal hands, and he was adding that. But it was just cool to see where that technology gone and how it can, give back certain elements of normal, but it's not a full replacement. It was great messaging as far as follow safety precautions, things like that, so you don't wind up in this position. But it was also, I think, just really positive because the guy was really well-rounded, really dynamic. Like, he's somebody I just love to hang with because just was a really fun, thought-provoking guy. As a comic fan, when I was just reading this story, you don't plan that like you're going to be reading a Metallo story around the same time that you're seeing this presentation. And it was just, it's so connected to real life for me that I'm like, oh my gosh, as we do this, at what point, what do we do to make sure that we maintain those connections? I love that he was dialoguing with his wife, just about what's different and all that. And just, they find different ways to connect, in those situations. But it was cool to see that he had that support system. And I was connecting what was real with what was going on with this character in the comics. And it was just such a neat experience where Corbin doesn't have that support system, right? Clearly doesn't have that support system, and he's being flat out manipulated. And it was something that was just really, really, I don't know, well done. Tracy's situation, we talked about Cyborg Superman when he comes out. Talk about a horrific situation. She's hung upside down. She's got these tubes in there. I'm assuming he's going to be carving her up pretty good.
Yes, I'm assuming Tracy is going to be. We're going to have a cyborg Superwoman, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is my guess.
I don't know.
I'm thinking. I don't know what his. I don't. Again, it's that creepiness of just. Yeah, what's going to happen now? I absolutely love that, and it's one of those things where because you're rooting for Superman, but you really are also rooting for Metallo.
Yeah,
I loved one of my favorite scenes of this was when Metallo's beaten and he's down and and he's like, "What are you going to do now, big man?" And do what the big man does. He's like, "Do you really think so little of me? Whatever strength I have doesn't belong to me. It belongs to those who need it. Right now, that's you." I love that moment. That for me was a true Superman moment of, you've killed people. You're going to answer for that. But first, your sister needs us. We're going to save her. And I love just that, again, that for me is always the great Superman moment. So I want to see Superman and Metallo go up against Cyborg Superman and whatever the sister is going to become. And I hope they can save the sister because, again, she's an innocent in all of this.
I agree.
The only good thing in Corbin's life has been his sister. And I'm hoping she'll be okay. Who knows? I don't know. I don't think things are going to go too well for her, unfortunately.
I agree. So we've also gotten this issue, part 4, home again, of that Superman and Lois story. Dan Jurgens is on story and pencils, Norm Ratman on inks, Elizabeth Breitweiser, I don't want to butcher her last name, Rob Lay on letters, Jillian Grant, assistant editor, Paul Kaminsky is the editor. I really love, we've got a classic creative team here with Elizabeth on colors, and I really, really am enjoying this story because you mentioned before on the podcast how there's storytelling with John's life where we got to see him at this age range that was fun to continue to explore and wanted to see more of it. I love that like the creative teams behind the scenes were like, hey, there's more stories to tell here with this. We're spotlighting them here. I love this kind of stuff. And this story with Gleanna, I got to admit, they swerved me. I did not see where this was going. I feel like I should have. And like when she's calling him a dunce for it, I'm like, I was too. John and I are in the same camp because I thought like this one really was going to be, she's a fish out of water and, her view of Earth and what, the top tier, like Superman's the prime, of course he's the ruler and, you are the prince and you must live this life of luxury and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, that's probably going to be the areas where if there's any conflict involving her, it's going to be her lack of understanding of just like what it means to be truly noble and truly humble and to be truly like a leader in this kind of way. And I really enjoyed that this story swerved me. And I like that it's not just John and her. We get, cool Superman and Lois and what they were doing at the time, how they were trying to raise their kid in a way that is more, to the core of how Clark was raised, to try and give him, as a grounded and rooted. I mean, but then you see where he like goes in his story. It's like he's being raised kind of similar to how Clark is with some of the circumstances Clark was dealing with as a child. I love these stories because I mentioned the Superboy concept and I like Superboy. This is why I always liked Superboy growing up. I'm referring to young Clark Kent. When we got to see those stories with him as a teenager and trying to interact with the world, it was always interesting because it's different than Superman. It's different than the adult. You're dealing with at a different age range. Your way of interacting with the world is naturally going to be different. I don't care if you call him Superboy or not. It's more of seeing a kid dealing with this. And I love these kind of stories. This is a journey back to my childhood because I got to read quite a few Superboy stories and always liked them. This really works because it's a very current, very contemporary version of that kind of concept. And I hope we continue to get more of these because I'm really, really enjoying this.
Big time. And again, like you, I loved, I was swerved by her as being the big bad. I was right along with you saying, oh, okay, yeah. But it's funny, after you know the truth and you go back and reread stuff and you start saying, oh, okay, little piece there's where I should have, little piece there where I should have. And so they did give you clues that she's really the bad guy here. And I love when they give you clues, but they make it so that you don't realize it until after the fact. But some great John moments of him as a kid and him figuring out his powers. He's not always 100% pure and vulnerable this time. She's got to heal him. They're stranded in the South Pacific, too far for him to fly, but he's like, don't worry, my dad has super hearing. He'll hear me call for help, and he'll come here because he's Superman. And then even after, right before the big reveal that she's the bad, the robot comes back. He's like, okay, we work together. We can do this. And I love the fact that he's like, yeah, the two of us, we can take this robot down. Let's do this, And you're like, nope, sorry, kid. I was like, oh, that is just brilliant because, again, wonderful John story. This is a young John Kent, and I so miss these kind of stories, because when they did the aging, when they did him, with Ultraman taking him away and keeping him away from his family, and all the horrific stuff that happened to John that made him he's now Superman. He's not Superboy anymore. We got these stories, and I'm glad we got this. And even in the fact that they're bringing back, Doombreaker, that was in the previous story. So the Doombreaker story isn't over because I like that concept of Doombreaker, of a regular person affected by the Doomsday Peace. So that was kind of cool. There's a lot of neat stuff that happened in this little backup story. And again, it gives me, I love that we're getting these ongoing backup stories. It's piece build on piece build on piece. It's a cool story and a neat way of telling it, and I was 100% happy with this.
And the Doombreaker piece also served with it happening in parallel. It served as a great reason as far as why Clark's not rushing to his aid. he can't.
Right.
I mean, we've got Lois in danger. We've got Doombreaker out there. He is not ignoring his kid. I mean, clearly is recognizing that John's reaching out, and he can't go get his kid right now because of the situation. So I like that kind of balance between them. The final story in this particular issue was the Steelworks story, which I really enjoyed. It's the writer is Dorado Quick. Artist is Yasmin Flores Montanez. The colorist is Brand Anderson. Letterer is Dave Sharp. Assistant editor is Jillian Grant. The editor is Paul Kaminsky. It's Steel, Engineer of Tomorrow, is part one of that story. I like that it gives us a little bit of a history of Steel. You know, like before he became the superhero. You know, we know the part where Superman saved him and all those pieces. But this idea that early on in his career, you know, he was, you know, a researcher. And he had a partner. And, you know, his tech was now being, which is very common, you set out with these ideals of, we want to use tech for the greater good and to help people. And we, you know, the same thing happens with medicine and, you know, in various lanes where it's like, we want to do these good things, but where can it make money? And, you know, there's the unfortunate part of, in our economy, you have to make money in order for your business to be able to continue. Research of any sort is very expensive. And that's not me justifying, you know, taking the wrong course of action. It's more you can understand how that happens and how it's pressured. You can also see how people can be corrupted by it, because I think there's a difference between trying to find a balance of, okay, we're involved in this kind of thing, which wasn't really what we were going for, but that's what keeps the lights on so that we can do this greater good stuff over here, right? And there's a part of that where if you find the right balance, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just diversifying your company, you're diversifying your platform so that way, one, A, can help finance B. And you can do these things that are really interesting. You can also go the other route where it's like, no, we're going all in on A and to like an excessive level. And also to the point where now A starts to become questionable in what we're doing. We've completely lost our way. And, you know, John leaves the company to the point where now he's working, you know, in construction and, you know, kind of going back to the basics. And I love that, like, that there's that line that he says in there. You can be anything you want if you just hammer away. The pay isn't the same, but I'm sleeping like a baby and you can't beat this view. And there's a point to that, because I think we've all been there at some point in time in our life where the stress of a job, the stress of something that's going on in your life is just making it hard to sleep. It's making, even during the course of the day, let's say you're sleeping just fine, but during the course of the day, you're being beat up by the fact that you've got this emotional thing welling up behind you, right? And it's just impacting the way you interact with others, things like that. When you're able to pull back and simplify and kind of get to the core of who you are, there's a peace and a calm that makes you more well-rested. That isn't always just about sleep. Sometimes it's about the noise not being there in your own head, right?
Yep.
I loved that because I like, this is where you can relate to this guy. And like, we've all been there in some way, right? And
yes.
it just, the sources are what's different. And that's when you've really got a well-crafted character. You and I are both huge fans of John Henry Irons, and this is why. It's this character from day one had a real humanity to him that made him, he was another gateway into like, oh, wow, I could be a part of Superman's world. Like, you know, he makes you feel like that, right? Because John is that guy that you could see being a part of your friendship group. And you're like, this could be me, you know, like on some level. And I love that about the character. He's an everyman plus, you know, where there's so much more to him. And it's an inspirational, it's a fun character. It's, he's well-rounded. He's human. I love his family. You mentioned in the TV series how they're handling him. This feels so much like a alternate or the version of the guy we're seeing in the TV series. Yes. You know, where they're not so distant from each other. There's a lot of connections between the two that you're like, I get how this is the guy that's on TV right now.
Oh, big time. And he's a character that when the whole death of Superman and then the Superman came out, he was one that I really did latch on heavy to. You know, and they did a brilliant job with him. So seeing the flashback sequence when he's kind of knocked unconscious, to back to that 100%. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Just again, it did have that. I get that nostalgic grin to it, and you do see why he can wear the S. Why Clark doesn't have a problem with this guy wearing the S. This is, he continues on what the true Big Red S stands for, and we see that constantly in John. And in some great stories with him about, again, he's not just a big punch, like we said earlier with Clark. Clark's an investigative reporter. Well, John is a smart guy. He's not just I'm going to punch you until you're knocked unconscious. He's able to plan. He's able to have, some little tricks up his sleeve, and that's how he takes out the one bad guy. But also, he's got Steelworks going on. Steelworks isn't just a business. It's about helping people.
Yeah.
And I did like the fact that, he flies in there as Steel and takes off the armor and reveals, hey, this is who I am. I'm John Henry Irons, and I am Steel. There's always a mix. I always have mixed emotions when heroes reveal their secret identity, because there's always the what about the family? Well, his family is also ironed up and armored up, so she's okay, And I like this usage of this as an introduction to people that John Henry's secret identity is no more now. So let's continue on with that story. And like all the other ones, there's a neat little swerve. Who's the big bad? Who's the villain behind this? What's going to happen next with John? So for a backup story, it gets you wanting to read more. It gets you wanting to read the next part. And as I said, we got a Power Girls miniseries. I'm hoping we get a Steelworks miniseries. I want more John Henry. I want more. Nat Bug is awesome.
Aren't we supposed to?
Yes.
Okay, I thought we were supposed to get a Steelworks, right? So we're right. Am I right on that?
Yes, we are getting. I know. I'm saying I hope we get one. We are definitely. It is slated. There is slated for a Steelworks, and I'm hoping this one can help, promote that one.
Yep.
And this can help build that up and get people wanting to read that. People who don't know how awesome Steel is, maybe now you can learn. You're getting a taste of him, and then you can pick up the ongoing, the limited series, and we can make it and turn it into an ongoing.
I like when. So I'm with you. I'm not a fan of the identity reveal and things like that, because I think it leads to a lot of problems. I think I'm always a fan. I always am a fan too when the identity goes back and is hidden again. This was different because it was a chess move. He knew that he needed something at this point in order to, especially because of his past experience, in order to validate direction, validate belief in Steelworks. Put trust into it. He knew how people viewed him as a hero, and there was an opportunity to utilize that and really reveal, this company comes from who I am and what I believe. So I'm going to lay it all out on the table. This is who I am. This is what I believe. What I do when I'm, steeled up and versus when I'm out of the costume, it's all interconnected. This is what we're trying to achieve here. This is what my goals are. This is who I am. This is what being saved by Superman did for me, who it made me, and what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to use the company to just continue to build off of that. The S stands for trust. I like how he does that. That was kind of a cool thing. And with your help, we can build a city of tomorrow. And just like we trusted in American Steel, you can trust in John Henry Irons. I thought that was great writing, because you're going to something that's true, that, we're going back now to America as a country. American Steel was something that we've trusted in. This was, this is an industry that has, made great strides in America and been something that was foundational. We're going back to that core concept. You can trust in me as well. I really liked how that played out. I absolutely am convinced that the guy in the shadows is his buddy from before. I'm not saying anything that his former partner. I like that they've introduced a new villain for him in this scenario, and a reason for a rival company to be, out to get him. This is really, really intriguing and interesting. And I'm into this story. I'm with you. I like that these are being used as a way to branch off into a more page count, more depth-filled miniseries. It's not that this doesn't have depth. That these are shorter snippets of a larger story. And If we never got a Steel miniseries, I want this. I'm glad that we're getting this. Yeah. Same thing with the I don't know what's going to happen with the the John and Superman and Lois stuff that's going on, kind of from Rebirth, those stories, if they're going to continue to be in here or if we're going to get an expansion of that into something else. I don't care. I just want more of the stories. This Action Comics format is just really, really working for me right now. I'm just glad to be reading this book, and it feels fresh at a time where I really need this kind of thing. This Dawn of DC, if it's got that label on it, I'm finding there's just an excitement around it right now. And, when you do these initiatives, you've got to have that, right? You've got to feel like this is exciting. It just got to reinvigorate you. We as fans read these books, continually, month in, month out. And every so often you need these little reboots that, rebranding, this is more of a rebranding than necessarily a full-on reboot. And it's working for me a great deal because of it.
Yeah. It's the Dawn of DC can't just be a moniker they use to sell books. It's
right.
There's got to be something that, why is this Dawn of DC? Okay, I'm seeing that. We're seeing that with so far all the books we've talked about. It does have that re-energize, has that revigoration feel to it. The characters, there's some growth in there. There's some tweaks, some changes. But again, it's not just a tweak and a change to sell a comic book. It's tweak and change in their evolution of their characters, the growth of who they are. And it's something that I really dig. And especially, as I've said multiple times, in Action Comics, we're really getting growth of all of the characters within the Super family. In the Superman title, we're getting some great growth of the characters. I'm really loving what they're doing with the big guy.
Yeah, I am too. And it amazes me that, all these years later, you can continue to get more stories, fresh stories, reimaginings of villains where you haven't thrown everything out the window. You are just building off of what was already there, foundationally and taking it to the next level. They've really done a great job with this, where it feels like home. Doesn't matter when you've read Superman, you can kind of jump in and read Action Comics and, feel like you're being brought up to speed on what's going on. But it feels like time has passed. The character has evolved. The character continues to grow, as does the villains and the supporting cast. And that's something, you and I are big on progression. I love the feeling of progression that's going on right now in these Superman books.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Our next discussion is on Superman #3. The writer is Joshua Williamson. Art and cover, art by Jamal Campbell. Letters by Ariana Mayer. Variant covers by David Nakayama, Francesco Mattina, Helena Lenoble, Travis Mercer, Danny Mickey, and Trish Mulhill. 125 variants by Megan Huang. 150 variant cover by Scott Collins. 100 variant cover by Jamal Campbell. The Superman family variant cover by Steve Rude. Assistant editor is Jillian Grant. Editor Paul Kaminsky. And Superman was created, of course, by Cleveland's own Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family.
This is another example of, we talked about it with the last segment, the artwork in that. The artwork's different in this. It's a different team, but while it feels like it's set in the same universe, I like the styling of this art and the action of it. And I mean, it really works well with this Parasite story, which, talk about this cool concept with Parasite. Parasite now has gotten to the point where it's almost like an infection.
Yeah. And
it gets out of control, like Parasite's control even, where it's this need to feed. And it's creepy because Parasite can gets inside you. It's not so much just that it's sucking the life out of you. It gets inside others and almost uses them as like tendrils, an extension of itself without intending to. Like, it's not something that it's controlling. And it has Parasite wouldn't really want this. What it's doing is it's only increasing the hunger. So, each of these little tendrils become another element that needs to feed. And now they're all competing for the, like, power sources. So when you find an energy source, now it's not one being that's trying to suck it up, it's multiple. And it's therefore dividing that up between them. And it really adds like this, just a different creepy element when you see the fact that you can be standing next to somebody and they don't know they're infected until they start feeding, right? Because the idea that Lois and Jimmy got affected was real. I didn't see that coming. Superman got infected. I mean, there was something really cool to this whole thing. I really enjoyed Lex's role in this because this is the book that's featuring Lex a lot more as a main player. And the ego of Lex, the presentation of Lex. I'm watching a lot of Smallville right now. It's interesting how much that show got right about who Lex is and how this issue has elements of what I really liked about the Smallville presentation of Lex here. This is a much older version of Lex that is so driven and thinks he's so right in the direction that he's going in. He's outgrown any of his insecurities, so to speak, or at least most of them. This is really, really a great presentation here. 3 issues in. Joshua Williamson is like sight unseen. If Joshua Williamson's writing it, I'm jumping on it. I love that I've got just a bank of writers right now where they jump on something, I'm just going to grab it because I just know it's going to be good. I know they're going to do something intriguing. I know that they understand how to get the core of the characters right while moving the needle. And this is a great example of that with this book. I mean, boy, all 3 issues have been gripping. Parasite's a character that, to me, Parasite was always that character that like popped on the scene in the road to getting to the big bad. Like Parasite was always thrown in the way, more of like, oh, if we unleash Parasite, that will be a roadblock for Superman. That will keep Superman from getting us because he'll be busy with Parasite. And there's elements of that's true in this, but this kicked up Parasite so much that it's like, wow, what a just valid. We talked a lot about horror in the last sequence. I feel this is every bit as creepy in a very different way. And I really like the sense of danger to Superman in this one. Like, how does Superman overcome this when the more powerful Superman gets, the more he's a Lunchables? And that part it's always been an intriguing part of Parasite.
Well, yeah, and I love, again, the Night of the Parasite, basically, instead of Night of the Living Dead is what they're doing with this. I loved how they took the Parasite story because, again, as you said, he's usually the villain that you throw at Superman to weaken him, to slow him down. He's not usually the main villain. Well, now in this story, he's the main villain, but he's not really. It's still the manipulation of this evil, the league of mad scientists that are out there that, it's Lex's villains that Superman's dealing with. And I love that concept of how you think you had it bad with me. Wait till you see the people I've been dealing with. And I love just that notion. And that's kind of why Lex is sort of doing this where he's helping Superman. But, Lex, can you completely trust him? Right. No, you can't. He's Lex Luthor. There's a reason. There's a reason he's having Superman deal with these villains for him. Lex could get out of that prison at any point in time he wanted to. But instead, he's having Lex deal with him. What is Lex's underlying goal? What is his ultimate thing? And I love the fact that that's a part of the story that's been hanging over Superman's head. And even in this issue later on, Lois brings that up, saying, hey, what if all of this is part of Lex's plan? You got to watch Lex with, how he's playing the game. You got to deal with him. And I love that, the fact that, the same stuff I'm thinking they're thinking about and they're looking at that. But on top of it, you've got this great story being told about a mutated parasite who now multiplies instead of just gets bigger, and you destroy it, it becomes 2. And then how are they, and then the super family is flying around using ice because that's the one thing that he can't really absorb. So they're using that, and they walled in the metropolis in a giant wall of ice and all the stuff that they're doing to contain the parasite. I absolutely loved how this was a full court press, full team all family members active and operating. You know, you see the super twins. You got the little bit of Supergirl there. You've got another. I think that's probably Superman in the other background. You know, John. But they got the full family working together to deal with this. On top of that, you got Clark dealing with it and having to actually work hand in hand with Luthor. And I loved seeing. It's always a really treat seeing Luthor and Superman work together because Lex really, really hates him, and Clark doesn't hate Lex. It's not Clark messing with Luthor by saying, "No, I don't hate you." He really doesn't hate him. You know, I don't think Superman able to have that kind of raw emotion against Lex. And so when you do see Superman get angry, it's always kind of neat. You know, but seeing those interactions of the two was just, again, brilliant storytelling. The artwork working with the writing, again. You can have a great story or you can have great art, but when you have them both working together, hand in hand, you create something epic. And this is an epic story for me so far.
And that's a pretty important part, is this feeling of this epic storyline. I like that we've got characters, like Livewire was really interesting because she's a more contemporary villain, right? That has been created along the way. But I say that, and she's actually been around a while now, you know, dating back to, you know, the era of Superman, the animated series. And so I say she's more contemporary, but I'm like, oh, realistically, Sean, she's been around quite some time now. Yeah. I like that they've like refreshed her, and, you know, she's got a podcast and she's got followers, and you could see living in this world why people would listen to this, right? You know, there's something about her, especially in today's era. You know, she would certainly gain an audience base that would be following her, and she could rope them in. But I like his reason for seeking her out. We need a way to attract the prime, you know, the actual real central parasite. Doesn't matter about the others. We need to identify where that one's at, because if we're going to stop this, we need to find out what actually happened to Parasite so that we can get this under control, undo this, find a way to, you know, wrap this bad boy up. And we have to do it quick, because with how exponentially they're increasing, it's this virus that is out of control. That even with the entire Superman family involved, they're just holding it at bay right now. And the clock's ticking. Like, that's only going to work so long before it gets overwhelming even for them. A lot of what you said earlier about, you know, how do you tell the kind of storytelling that justifies these type of characters? Boy, are they doing a great job with that, because this really had a sense of scale where you understand why these characters are a little bit in the background, because they're off handling things that Superman can't do while he's front and center trying to get to the root of what's going on. It's Livewire sitting there going, so you're doing this for them to come and like eat and you know, you better protect me in this scenario. Being able to Superman using that suit, I thought that suit was really interesting. Seeing how effective he is when he is working with Lex was also an intriguing piece of this. Yep. Because they actually are a good team. And that part was, I thought, really well written here, where you could see how these two, in a different reality, could have been friends and could have been really effective together. It's just that won't ever truly be the case, but you can see how, like, this allegiance right now does make sense for them, and it's a better way for Clark to kind of keep an eye on Lex and hopefully guide that direction. But I really, this storyline served as a really good reason to see the two of them together, and I wouldn't want this being front and center in both books. I like that these events are clearly happening by the way both books are reflective of each other, but this is exploring one angle. Action's exploring another angle. We're getting a little bit more of the family focus in Action. I really like the way that they're kind of divvying up these books right now. I think the Superman line is being well served by the fact that I feel like I'm getting this in this book, I'm getting this in that book.
Yes, big time. And I love, again, just the intelligence of Clark, because he kind of comes up with the idea of using the energy to pull not only the physical parasites on the street, but the microscopic ones out of him, out of Lois, out of Jimmy, out of all the people it's affected. It's pulling that out as well. And I like the fact that it was Clark who thought of that, not Lex.
Yeah.
You know, because Lex even comments like, "Oh, so you're using it not to them, but the microscopic ones as well." You know, kind of a, you know, he doesn't say good idea, but it's kind of a tip of the hat, you know. And, you know, seeing, you know, Lex and Clark work together, it's, if those two could ever be on the same page, full-time, permanent, they'd solve all the world's problems.
Yep.
If Lex Luthor ever could be, instead of obsessed with killing Superman, he would be the greatest hero in the world. But he's got that one character flaw, that he 100% does not trust Superman. He does not want an alien to be the person that everyone looks up to. They should be looking up to him. And that is the great character flaw that Lex Luthor has that makes him the villain versus making him the hero. And I wish that one day he could figure that out. You know, I would love to see a story where we actually get a Lex who figures that out. But, you know, until then, we get these moments. We get these team-ups. And we get some, you know, and it's funny, we get some absolutely disgusting moments in this book that are done so well. Like when Clark is puking up all the microscopic versions of him, they did a great job with shading, so you don't actually see him puking it up.
Yeah, yeah.
And then later, when Parasite is, you know, feeding on his little children in a way, you know, again, it's absolutely disgusting, but they don't really go too horrific and too gory on us that it makes you disturbing. But it does show, they show Livewire, like, oh, gross, oh my God. You know, it just, everyone's physical reaction to it until you get to the gluttonous version of Parasite, who's just like, he's gonna blow. And I'm like, man, he is just so beyond full than he's ever been. You know, and you've got little body parts sticking out of him, and just, it's an absolutely disgusting looking, but they didn't, you know, go overboard on it. Because again, brilliant usage of the shading, of the darkness, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a great use of that. I really liked in this the personal moments in this as well, because we get all of that, but we also get some time at the Daily Planet. I like that Clark has a lame excuse as far as where he was during the events that were happening.
Yep.
And again, dude, when he got locked in the bathroom, call me next time. But I like that Lois jumps in immediately and talks about how it's cute and, you know, basically implies that she's happy to see him. And it kind of immediately deflects from the sequence. And Jimmy's, you know, ready to get we're back on the fact that we're all hungry right now because of what happened. The moments where Clark and Lois are sitting down and now the masks are off and they're able to really talk were some great pages. I really enjoy seeing her as a confidant, somebody you can talk through, somebody who is questioning the situation, questioning Lex, questioning, you know, what's going on, also giving advice and how much he relies on that advice. But then they have that sweet moment where you remember that they're a married couple, right?
Yep.
And you need that balance too. And there's something about that relationship that I really loved. The sequence I love is when he's floating and carrying her and they're ready to start dancing. The sunlight coming through the window and the effect that the artwork and the coloring and everything, you know, just managed to pull together was just a beautiful sequence of events with the family. I mean, there's a Get a Room. I love that song. It's fine. You get that moment, but then it was almost like nobody else was there. It was just them. I just really loved the storytelling there.
Oh, Bill, big time. And everything you're talking about, how just that, you know, you go from that Lois in a panic mode, and I don't want to say panic because Lois Lane really doesn't panic, but she's like, what about this? And what about that? What about that? And what about that? And Clark's just like, we'll get through this, you know, and just that calmness of Clark to the point where she's like, dance with me. Because he'd been using the music and the headphones to drown out Luthor. Well, she's like, you don't have to listen to that music by yourself. You got me. And I love just how that played out, and just, you know, everything you're saying about how when they're dancing, but they're flying. You know, and if you're Superman, yeah, this is something I would imagine Superman would do. You know, and this is something that is just absolutely brilliant. And then you flip the page, and once again, you get a great Superman Lex moment. And I love just how Lex is just sitting there. He's got over a dozen people constantly watching him, the T-skirts, and he's just calmly reading a book. And he's like, oh, come to gloat. That's not my style. I'm like, oh, man, I loved these two interactions. And I love the fact that, again, Superman still hasn't given up on Luthor. All this stuff that Luthor's done, Superman still wants, Luthor to be a good guy. He wants Luthor to do the right thing. And he keeps giving Luthor this chance to do the right thing. And I love that about this guy. It's one of those really cool superhero things. And it's something, and I love the fact that Lex sees it as a weakness. Superman's heart, his ability, his compassion, Luthor sees that as a weakness. He's always seen that as Superman's greatest weakness, not kryptonite. That's, his compassion to Lex is his weakness. And I love the fact that we still keep seeing that on and on about these two.
Steelworks #1, by the way, is in June. We were asking about Steelworks #1 before.
Well, that's the one written by Michael Dorn, too, right?
Steelworks?
Yeah, I thought.
I don't know. I don't remember who's writing it. I was just looking to see when the release date was, and it's on that checklist that they've been putting in the books that it comes out in June. I think you're right, but I'm not going to pretend I'm 100% sure on that when I'm not. The Signal Watch thing was cool. I like the whole Marilyn Moonlight. Where's that going? That was an intriguing, interesting character that seems to be on the side of the Angels, and we'll see what that's going to look like. I'm wondering, how she ties into what's going on with these other scientists that are out there that are rivals to Lex Luthor. But seeing what we're going to looks like it's going to clearly be some evolution of Silver Banshee, and that's what's coming next.
Yeah,
is at least I think it's what's coming next. That's certainly where this group's going to be heading next. That part's going to be really intriguing for me. I like that they're building an interest. They're drawing me in. This villain, evil mystery science villain group has me really they're creepy and dangerous, and that's experimentation is always something where it's altering, right? Permanent. It's very hard to go back from the things that end up happening to you. And knowing that they're going to be playing around with some of these long-standing villains that have been around is going to be something that's really interesting. Silver Banshee has always been a character that I've enjoyed, and I'm going to be anxious to see what they do with her.
Well, I'm assuming another mutation of the power set or something like that, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, we've got this league of evil supervillains that, they're I don't know if Lex keeps saying they're his villains that he deals with, but you do wonder. I'm wondering if these are old Lex's partners that he double-crossed.
Oh, I think that's exactly what it is.
That's the reason they're all anti-Luthor. It's because he double-crossed all of them, and now they're you know what? We're going to take you down, Luthor.
Right.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
All right, Jim, let's talk some DC news. David Ayer's original Suicide Squad script has reportedly surfaced online. And I'm always interested in seeing what the original treatment of movies was supposed to be. So I'm hoping to seek that out and see what it looks like if it has, just because it's always interesting to see what changed along the way, what was the original intention, because that movie was supposed to have some serious Joker stuff in it. And I would love to see what that was supposed to be, what it was going to look like. I liked the film, what we got, but I always was curious because I liked that portrayal of the Joker, and know that there was at least a time frame where it was supposed to somehow lead into an eventual potentially a Batman movie with it, and I would have loved to have seen what that was going to look like.
Well, you can tell even in the cut we got how much stuff they had extra with the Joker. Just because he kept flashing in and out of it. There was a lot more going on with it. So, like you, I'd love to see what that was, or instead of cutting it, could they have actually made its own side movie? Because I think they filmed enough for a second movie.
Oh yeah,
do a side, and you could have done a Joker movie that takes place during the Suicide Squad. So you'd have some of the crossover sequences that we saw in the Suicide Squad movie, but you show it in this whole side Joker movie. They really could have done that.
I'm a big fan of Valiant. Their comic line, I've always enjoyed it. I jumped on a couple years into Valiant. I'm talking about the original Valiant run when it started kicking off. I heard good things about it, and I picked up a couple of books on a whim and just got drawn into the universe. It's just really great characters and just something different. So Green Ronin's going to be releasing a Valiant Adventures RPG that James pointed out, but they're also Blackstone and Valiant are going to be doing some novels based on the Valiant Comics content. And it's always fun to see novel forms of comic book storytelling because you're able to, through the dialogue and kind of expand on what's going on in characters' heads and things like that. I always enjoy reading novels that are based on the comics just to see what they end up doing with, that you have to do things without the visuals, right? So it's interesting to always see that kind of piece. I haven't read this article yet, but Joe Russo and Fortnite's Donald Mustard are weighing in the future of storytelling, gaming, and entertainment. And I feel like, so I just started playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor this weekend, and it's the sequel to the last Star Wars game. I'm really finding that the games I get drawn into are ones that are story-based. Whether it's an action game, it's an RPG, it's an open world game, whatever kind of game it is, story is usually the first thing that draws me in. I love puzzle games, things like that. I'm a big fan of the Mario games and those type of things, but you don't go into a Mario game looking for this really depth-filled storytelling. and I don't say that knocking the Mario games. They're not supposed to be. It is this like puzzle that you play when you play Mario games or the Toad games or things like that. Sure, there's a storyline of you're saving Peach from Bowser and all of that, and I like that. It's not meant to be anything other than that. The fun and the challenge of that is the depth of the levels and the design and the creativity there. But boy, this Star Wars game, I'm saying it should be a movie. It feels like a movie. It feels like a trilogy, like its own trilogy that's being crafted here. And I just really, really love the characters. Mariah came down and was sitting by me when I was playing part of the game and actually got kind of drawn into the story. And, the BD-1 robot and things like that that's back. It's kind of cool. So it's interesting now because I really feel, I've always felt that there is a strong link between, and it's a fan base that you can tap into for comics in the gaming market, just because I feel like comic book storytelling naturally lends itself to that crowd. And because I know what draws me into gaming. I really like games that have the storytelling component to them. And I'm anxious to read that article. The Green Arrow miniseries has been upgraded from 6 issues to 12. And that was just announced. Jared put that piece out there. I didn't know that. That is really great news.
Nice.
And we're seeing this happen. This happened with Poison Ivy. And, I'm hoping that leads to maybe from 12 to ongoing.
That'd be nice. That would be really nice to have an ongoing Green Arrow story, especially since after reading issue 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be talking about that next episode. I can't wait to actually dive into Green Arrow because it's a character I've missed, having his own series. So I'm going to jump to something real quick. Dawn of DC grows out with Blue Beetle, September of 2023. And I'm excited to see another Blue Beetle series. I love the character. So yes, please bring on more. Looks like Starfire's going to be in it, at least from what we're seeing there. But I'm glad to see more of the Dawn of DC with, and they say that in all these blurbs that we're seeing with the checklist, that be prepared to see more titles being announced throughout 2023. And boy, has that been the truth. And every one they're announcing has me excited. Blue Beetle, I'm assuming you're like, yay, more Blue Beetle, right?
Oh, well, of course. 100%. Come on, man. The Beetle's awesome.
The Flash, did you see the new trailer?
I haven't had a chance to yet, no.
Oh, it's so good. And I've got to say, we've talked on the show about how sometimes, I don't get really into seeing like multiple trailers. The Flash is totally different. I'm on a hook. Bring me in with new trailers. They've done a really good job with these trailers of making each trailer feel fresh. It's gotten me more excited. This one led to some memes because remember from Batman '89, you want to get nuts, let's get nuts.
Yeah.
He uses that line.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and there's been memes that have come out of that, which is really great. This is one of the few ones where, boy, they're giving it very high ratings. You know, like you're already hearing the first reactions calling it one of the best superhero movies ever. Normally I'm like, oh, I want to pin back those expectations a little bit, but I'm cautiously optimistic because I'm just hearing so many good things about this movie from such a diverse crowd of people that I'm feeling like, oh, please let this be that movie.
Please,
yes.
I know.
That starts making some noise, so it'll be a good one. Good news on the Batman animated front, because there were rumors of a potential that Batman Caped Crusader was going to be picked up by Amazon. Not only are they picking that up, but they're going to be getting the Merry Little Batman animated film and a spin-off series, Bat Family, from Warner Brothers Animation. So there's going to be really cool Batman animation over at Amazon Prime. I'm just glad to see it got picked up versus never being made, right?
Yes, 100%.
So I'm glad that finally has been announced, and we really are getting a home for that. We're going to be getting a new Power Girl and Fire and Ice series. So, again, continued expansion of the Dawn of DC with characters that I really do want to read more of. Fire and Ice, they're characters that obviously in our tenure of doing the podcast, you've gotten exposure to. I don't think you read much JLI. Read them in various appearances since we've been doing the podcast. Does a Fire and Ice miniseries, does a Fire and Ice series excite you? Or are you intrigued to kind of see, like, hey, let me pick up the first issue and see if this is a thing?
Well, Fire and Ice is actually those characters that I forget about until I see them. Like, oh yeah, these are awesome characters.
Cool.
You know, so it's one of those things where they do hit the screen, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, cool. Nice. So when I saw this news, I was like, one, I was happy about the Power Girl, but then the Fire and Ice series, I'm like, oh, perfect. This is going to be a fun book. Yeah.
And that's something that's looking really, really great for me. The Brave and the Bold Superman variant cover as something really intriguing for me. I'm excited for the Brave and the Bold series because it's going to be an anthology book, and the creative teams that they keep announcing for this, that's what really has me excited. This looks like it's going to be kind of a mix of what I liked about Brave and the Bold in the past, but also Legends of the Dark Knight, where it seems to be this series that's just going to have a lot of top-tier creators telling really cool stories. Marvel Comics Presents had this kind of vibe, too, of what it looks like we're getting from Brave and the Bold. I like those kind of anthologies, so fingers crossed that this winds up paying off into being the cool series that it looks like it's going to be. Karen Gillan, and I butcher her last name all the time, and I've loved her since Doctor Who. Wants to play Poison Ivy in the DCU Batman movie, and oh my gosh, you couldn't have better casting. She'd be terrific in that.
Yes, she would pull. And it's funny because it's not even just the red hair. You know, that is, you know, obviously you always want that in Poison Ivy, but they can always dye in wigs and whatnot. The way she presents herself, she could pull off Poison Ivy so well, because Ivy is that great character that, yeah, she's a villain, but you see the noble purposes behind what she's doing and why she's doing it. And so you kind of can sympathize with her. We've seen her, we've seen Karen in Guardians of the Galaxy present that kind of character.
Nebula. Yeah.
Where, you know, you've got this villain, this nasty person who you kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing and what, you know, and you see the personal, over the past couple of movies, you've seen the growth of her as a person because she's exposed to better quality people around her. She's got a better quality of sociopath around her now. So you can see the growth of her as a person. So I could 100% see her playing Poison Ivy.
Did you see her Netflix? Do you have Netflix?
Yes.
Did you see that? I think it's called Gunpowder Milkshake. Yeah, it is Gunpowder Milkshake.
No, I have not.
So it's one of those Netflix original films. She stars in it, and it's a cool action movie. You know, she's somebody literally that, like, if she's in something, I'm going to see it just because she's in it. Yeah. Just because the Doctor Who thing was really
from the Doctor, you know, you're 100% locked in on who she is, and then as she starts branching out to other stuff, you're like, oh, she's really good.
She is. She was great in that, and she's been consistently good in the other things you mentioned. Guardians and obviously the Avengers flicks that she's been in. She's done a great job. It's a character who I can't wait to see more of what she does. And she brings characters to life in a way that has just been really satisfying. She's made some really smart choices.
And I'll be honest with you, I love commitment to the character, commitment to the craft. Because when she first got on Guardians, everyone's like, "Oh, what are they doing? A wig? How are they doing?" And she, at the panel, she takes off her wig and she shaved her head bald for the role, and then she's just walking around with the long red-haired wig. And I'm like, that was absolutely brilliant. I loved when she did that
during Peter David's run, and I remember reading this, and I was like, "Oh, that is super cool." They managed to sneak death into a Marvel comic from the Sandman family. And it was great to see that comic panel brought to life. They did it really. I like when comic companies do this, the wink and a nod to creative, and that piece was really cool that Peter David managed to sneak it in. That Norm Rapman art piece is really, really slick.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, James, for posting that. And I didn't know Superhero Day was Did you know Superhero Day was a thing? Have we?
I only knew because someone wished me Happy Superhero Day. I'm like, oh, thank you. I didn't know it was a thing.
But it's really cool that it is. How did you celebrate?
I was working, so yeah.
But did you take a break and go out and fight crime? Come on.
There is the secret identity. Come on. Yeah. Now, I didn't do anything, but Bridgeman did foil a couple robberies.
That's good. That's good. You stop people from going on a couple of bridges.
Exactly.
Don't detour.
Yep.
It's interesting to see some of the cameos that were scrapped for The Flash. There are cameos from Marlon Brando's Jor-El, Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, Burgess Meredith's Penguin, and Cesar Romero's Joker. Grant Gustin's Flash were scrapped from it. These were a list of cameos, was huge, but they had to pick and choose, and I get why they had to pick and choose. But it's cool that they were just exploring what's the right balance of cameos and how far can we go. Especially when you're the Flash and you're jumping through world to world. I really like that.
Yeah, I always do wish they would have had Linda Carter's Wonder Woman in there, just because there's always something about her as Wonder Woman that I'm like, if we can't get Gal Gadot, give me Linda Carter.
Yeah, absolutely. IDW, I don't know if you've been following this news, and thanks, James, for posting this. This was something I saw in the latter part of this week. IDW Publishing, which I'm a big fan of IDW and their output, they've done a really good job with their own original comic, with licensed comics, with their licensed comics, as far as putting out just really quality books. And they've had to lay off 39 of its staff and appointed a new CEO. I hope that they're able to, 39% of its staff and appointing a new CEO. So it's that restructuring. I'm hoping that they're able to get things together and find a way to balance. That gets me worried just about the state of comics when you've got a big publisher, because IDW is a big name, and they've managed to put out just, I think, real good quality in comics. So losing them in any capacity will be a blow. So I hope this restructuring and reorganization winds up being good, and I hope anybody affected by the layoffs land on their feet and find employment. And it's always sad to hear that in the industry. It's something throughout our tenure of the podcast. There's been a number of companies that have gone through this. DC's gone through reorganizing and restructuring, throughout that time. And I'm always looking first for creative. And the people that we forget behind the scenes a lot of times in that are editors and people that are on the office side of things that are impacted by this with positions, that they're the ones that are responsible for, green lighting or pulling in the talent or pushing for a certain line of comics that we really enjoyed. And, when they go, you sometimes don't realize the impact that they had behind the scenes. And I can't pretend that I always understand all of that, but my heart goes out to them, and thank you for the quality of work, because I'm a big fan of IDW. You read a lot of their stuff, don't you?
Yes, I've read a lot of IDW. And this kind of, as you said, this is scary, because the nature of comic books, we're always worried about them. We keep saying, comic books will never go away, but it's very possible they can. And when you hear about staff layoffs, it's not just writers and artists. It is the behind-the-scenes people, administrative assistants, people who, just the accounting team, just the general tech people. You lay off a tech department, or who knows all the different people who get laid off, and it's, it does hurt a lot. And when you start weakening a structure, you weaken your foundation, the building will fall. And if, with this restructuring stuff, if they've weakened the base structure of the company itself, IDW won't make it, even if they keep putting out wonderful stuff. If, your product is great, but you've got nothing to support that product, it ain't going to happen. And I'm worried about them. I'm worried about, again, comic book industry itself.
I may be naive about this. I'm not worried about comics themselves going away. I used to be, kind of like, well, what happens if we don't have this medium? I'm not so much in that place. It's more, I'm worried about less choice. One of the things I think we are in and remain in, we've been in for the last maybe decade or so, this interesting era of choice, where there's just a lot of choice out there. I think that makes it a struggle sometimes because you're dividing that choice sometimes between your already in-place comic book audience, which isn't as rich as it used to be. It's not as, there are not as many of us as there used to be. And that's why I'm always interested in ways that they're kind of honing in on and targeting new crowd. So I'm sad to see this kind of thing because IDW, I'm not putting the nail in the coffin of IDW. I hope this works, and that they're able to, reinvigorate from this. And like I said, my heart's out to anybody who's impacted by this, and I hope they land somewhere solid and get a really good job out of this.
Holy caffeine!
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. You prefer to contact us that way. RagingBullets.com is the show website. It feeds into Twitter. It feeds into our Facebook fan page. We are also proud to be part of an amazing Facebook group community. And I want to thank everyone for putting together the Speeding Bullets segment this episode. We really appreciate you and your efforts. It's always the first place I go to see what's going on in DC, not just DC, but around comics. So thank you for everyone for curating that information for us. The About Us section of our show website is where you can find out how to connect with us on social media and gaming platforms. I am going to put a little disclaimer on this because what I found recently is I'm getting a lot of spam. When I'm getting a lot of people that are trying to add me that are not, they seem to have similar followers, but then when I click yes to them, they start messaging me and trying to sell me stuff. It's like, hold on a second here. Are you a friend of the show? I want anybody listening to this podcast. You're my friends. I want to add you. So if for some reason I do not add you or I'm delayed in adding you, don't be afraid to message me and say, hey, I'm a listener to the podcast or, I'm part of the Facebook group or, I know you this way or something like that. Just give me a little nudge. Don't take it personal. It's just I'm getting hammered right now with people that are all of a sudden out of the blue that are just trying to add me. So I just want to put that little disclaimer out there. Also, you can hear me regularly on Is It Jaws, the film review podcast. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Seglin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Titans, issue number 1 has been relisted, so you can get the Nicholas Scott cover for 50% off, only $199. Plus, we have Titans issue number 2, 40% off, only $239. And we have Steelworks issue number 1 of 6, 40% off, only $299. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, just a reminder that you can pick up the Authority Trade Paperback Book 1, 2023 edition, $29.99, regularly 50% off, only $14.99. And the Creature Commandos Trade Paperback 2023 edition, $24.99, regularly 50% off, only $12.49. I want to thank DCB Service at InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back. We're actually going to be doing double duty and recording some back-to-back episodes. We're going to be taking a look at, over 2 episodes, 4 different books. We're going to look at Batman, Shazam, Superman Lost, and Green Arrow. So we'll see you for the first part of that next week.
Bye!
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Raging Bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
it's right
Jim,
I don't know.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's our production.